My name is Matt Kriegler. I'm a potter or ceramic artist and also a goat farmer and cheesemaker. I grew up in the suburbs of the Twin Cities, a suburb of St. Paul in Minnesota. Minnesota has a pretty rich studio pottery history. So that stuff was also kind of around. Not so much growing up, but in my high school years I was more aware of galleries in the area and local potters and things like that. I had a really wonderful high school art teacher. His name is Todd Clerks, and he really encouraged a lot of experimentation and freedom in anything you wanted to make. As long as you were working, you were free to experiment and work on whatever you liked. We were doing things like making pots and distorting them, hitting them with things, throwing things at them, and it was really a great environment. In a lot of ways, there was more, I think, freedom to experiment there than there was in my college classrooms. So I went to the University of Minnesota and got my BA in studio arts. I didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked in the ceramic studio there. They were very popular classes. It was difficult to get into them. So I did do some photography there, some sculpture and painting a little bit. And I wasn't making as much when I was in college. I had some challenges with all the other things going on with pressure from school and some anxiety and things like that. So I wasn't making quite in the same way and didn't find quite the same encouraging environment there as I had in my high school, which was kind of a surprise to me. And then a couple years after I graduated, my wife and I moved to Hawaii for her job. She got a job teaching at the university there. And so while we were there, I wasn't doing clay for a few years really at all, kind of between college and the couple years of kind of getting settled there. But I found a really wonderful community there, the Hawaii Potters Guild, which was basically run like a co-op, but a really, really great community of people. The entire guild was volunteer run, with the exception, I think, of their accountant. Everybody there, including the accountant, was a potter. They were working in the studio, kind of teaching each other formal classes, informal instruction, and lots of really wonderful potlucks. That's a potter thing, I think. I heard somebody say if you get 3 potters together, a potluck will just break out. Probably one of the #1 things I miss about living in Hawaii is that community, and specifically Rakuho Laulea on the North Shore, firing pots all weekend on the beach. So my wife got a job offer in New Jersey, so we decided to move here. It was a really nice offer, and our families are both still in Minnesota, so we're not close to them right now, but we're much closer than we were. And I have a brother in New York City and one in Norway, so we're also much closer to them. We kind of in the back of our head, I think, knew at some point we'd have to come back, and this was a good opportunity to do so. And I worked in a studio in Flemington for a couple of months maybe, kind of while we were getting settled and looking for a place to live. And we ended up buying this house here where we are. And so I was able to have some space in the garage for my studio. I believe it was the first year we were here that I did the apprenticeship at the Moravian Tile Works. It's a tile factory that was most active in the early 1900s and sort of works as a living history museum. So they have full-time staff who are in production making tiles from the same molds and in the same ways that they did during that time, and using a local clay. So it's clay dug in Bucks County, straight out of the ground. It's not modified in any way, and all their tiles are made out of that clay. It was really, wonderful people to work with, a wonderful place to work. The studio and the factory is beautiful. I believe one of the first large reinforced concrete structures in the area for sure, and so it's a beautiful structure as well and a great place to work. And I got to do some really fun projects there as well. And because they're making things in a way that they were made in the early 1900s, it translates very well to a small studio because everything's handmade with very simple tools. There's not a lot of machinery involved. So it was a valuable learning experience as well. to be able to make tiles on a small scale in a small space. Mostly I do functional things like mugs, plates, bowls, things like that. I really like the idea of people being able to use my things. I mean, that's part of it, is people liking the way they feel, the handle, the way it feels, the way the glaze feels, the way it holds liquid. There's all kind of interesting things that you wouldn't necessarily think about at first, but that becomes part of a fun, like, technical challenge. Part of the reason I really love ceramics is it's art, but there's really a lot of science and technical knowledge in it as well. You know, the shapes of handles and lips and things have a large impact on the way, say, like a mug functions. And there's also a lot of know-how in kiln firing, doing things at different temperatures in the kiln and kind of knowing how that's working, and chemistry and the glaze formulation and clay formulation as well. So it's very hands-on, and there's a lot of interesting technical things going on. So a nice balance of art and science and manufacturing, I guess. One of the most fulfilling things is for someone to come back after they've bought a bowl or a mug or something and not just say that they love using it, but to tell me why. Like, if it's the handle or the lip or something like that, is very rewarding and it's also great feedback. About 3 years ago, we started a small goat dairy. So I'm working with the goats, feeding goats twice a day, and cheese making during our season, cheese making and bottling milk. So that's also kind of a fun science art split. There's a lot of science in cheese making and also some not so concrete art decisions that need to be made with that. So that takes up a lot of time, and also the maintenance of the farm, fixing fences and trimming goat hooves and cutting firewood and clearing the driveway when trees fall and things like that. So all very physical work, which is important to me. You know, the rhythm is kind of a hard thing to nail down. I find that I tend to work best in the evenings here. Summertime is very difficult to be in the studio because it's our most busy time here with making cheese and going to markets and things like that. I do need some time in the winter to recover, so it's a little bit hard to get started. But I actually find that when we start to have kid goats, they live in the garage here, so they're kind of in my studio. And we're feeding them 3 or 4 times a day, so it's easy for me to feed them and then stay in the studio until they need to be fed at 9 o'clock or midnight, because I need to be up anyway. So it's kind of an incentive, or it's a time that's kind of automatically carved out for working in the studio. You know, I think the most helpful thing for me is being with other people who make things. You know, being around people who make things and seeing other pottery, woodwork, things that people make is helpful. And also just working with my hands. I mean, I think that has a lot to do with why I like to make pottery as well. It's very tactile. You're using your hands all the time. The other things I really like to do are also very hand intensive. I worked for a very long time as a bicycle mechanic. For about 15 years or so. Those motor skills translate well to pottery, and it's a very soothing thing to do, to work with your hands. So things like fixing cars or tractors or building things with wood, that kind of stuff helps me as well. One of the nice things about being a potter is this trading between artists and things, and so I don't keep a lot of things in my studio, objects for inspiration, but our cabinets are full of like friends' pots, and so it's nice to use those every day and, you know, kind of be reminded of where they came from and who made them and things like that. Yeah.